stems from chapters 1 through 4 out of the textbook. Okay, so if you're looking for kind of what have we been talking about today, where's it all coming from, that sort of thing, if you go back and you read through chapters 1 through 4, you'll pretty much find most everything that we've talked about. Okay, and kind of work through examples there and problems, and then in terms of the individual sort of vocabulary and that sort of thing, everything's pretty much stemming from the first 4 chapters out of the book from today. So what I wanted to do now, for the last, like I said, 40 minutes or so, is I have a handful of additional terms I want to sort of talk our way through that we need to just kind of get through for today. And then we'll take the last few minutes of class to maybe do a few little introductions and kind of talk a little bit about the course structure from this point forward, what sort of tests you're going to have and when those are going to occur and all that sort of thing. Okay, so some of the terms that, in addition to the ones that we've already talked about, that you need to kind of make sure that you're focusing in on, that you become familiar with and understand, you need to understand assumable loans, what they are, and effectively, when they can occur and what they're beneficial for, that sort of thing. So what exactly is an assumable loan? Well, many loans are not assumable. Let me just sort of start with that premise. Many loans in the past, historically, were assumable. And what it meant was that Robert could have gone down, gotten a loan on a property, and that loan maybe had a loan term of, let's say, 15 years. And after maybe the first 5 years, Robert is ready to sell the property to let's say me, and I'm saying Robert got an outstanding interest rate on his loan, and the current prevailing interest rates are much, much higher than what Robert got 5 years ago. So I would like to take over his loan. I would like to assume it. I would like to basically continue his payments for him for the remainder of that loan. Now, historically, what would have happened is that we would have gone into the lender together, and I would have provided documentation to the lender, and basically, the lender would say, okay, yeah, you're qualified as a person to assume his loan at that interest rate, and I would have started making payments. However, then there are some issues here of, well, what if I were to default on the loan? Would he still be responsible? And in some cases, yes, you would have still been responsible if I were to have defaulted. But in other cases, where the lender was willing to sign off and release you of liability, then I would just simply take over your payments. I would now be responsible. You would no longer be responsible if I were to default. Now, many lenders, as you can imagine, pretty much got away from that altogether because of the complexities and the issues associated with it. However, it still exists in sometimes, the more informal lending arrangements that may occur kind of from a person to person or family member to family member kind of sort of arrangement. But most traditional lenders no longer really allow what we would call really an assumable mortgage. Now, you can get around it in a couple of ways. Like, for example, if you purchase the real estate asset in some sort of a corporate entity or some sort of maybe a partnership entity, and obviously you can sell shares of stock to basically where Robert just simply, he has created ABC Corporation, and the ABC Corporation owns this particular building, then Robert can effectively sell me his shares in ABC Corporation. I acquire ownership, so indirectly I can assume the loan in that direction. However, you can still have some lenders that will get a little bit more persnickety about those kinds of things and say, well, even if, especially in a smaller, more tightly held corporation, even under those circumstances, it still may trigger a due-on sale sort of clause, meaning the moment that you effectively make that transfer, the whole loan could potentially become due and payable. So there's some real interesting things to be sort of aware of with that. But as a general rule, the assumable loans can be a really good thing, but there's very few of them sort of left out there in the traditional sense. But yet, it's still something worth investigating. However, I would argue that an awful lot of folks under the table figure out ways to effectively assume somebody else's loan. I mean, it's, once again, what I sort of said, like the more informal kinds of things of family member to family member, that maybe husband and wife acquire a loan and purchase, let's say, a house, and then subsequently they allow maybe their son or their daughter to potentially take over the payments on that loan or something like that. And so, yeah, that sort of thing exists. But however, if the lender found out about it, they probably wouldn't be inherently thrilled about it.
So since that's not necessarily something that's done nowadays, all of these are due on sale?
Many of them are. Most loans are typically going to be due on sale because the lender is going to want to ensure that they have complete control over who that actual borrower is on the note. I mean, as I said, there still a lot of kind of more, what I would call, like I said, backdoor, kind of deals or family kind of issues that may allow for these things to exist in theory, but it's legally, as a general rule, not so much. Denville, do you have a question?
I was saying that in some cases, the lender will run a credit.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. You can have a qualifying assumption that the lender would run a credit check on the prospective purchaser, and if they were okay with that person, then they could allow them to assume the loan. Yep. Okay. Now, next one is one of my favorites: seller financing. And that is where you have either an individual, company, whatever it might be, that owns a property outright, and maybe has owned it for several years. They no longer have a mortgage against it. Many cases, it's just simply an individual, and they want to sell their property, but for whatever reasons, it may be a challenge to get traditional, conventional financing on that property. It may have some mild environmental issues. It may have, some mild regulatory issues. It may have, some things that would potentially make a traditional lender sort of shy away from it as a property to lend on. So in order to sell the property, what may be required is for the current owner to offer seller financing. And to basically say, all right, I as the property owner am willing to, engage in a long-term loan with you for the next, whatever, 10, 15 years. We work out the terms of the loan, of 15-year term, 6% interest rate, and effectively come up with, a mortgage payment, and you can bypass a lot of the traditional sort of closing costs with that kind of an arrangement, because with that sort of arrangement, since you're dealing directly with the current owner, they're not going to have any motivation for you to go out and do an appraisal. They're not going to have any motivation for you to go out and do a title search or I'm not saying you shouldn't, I'm saying they're not going to have any motivation for you to have to go out and do inspections. They're not going to have any motivation for you to really do much of anything other than simply you'll file the paperwork with the local county clerk that you have engaged in this long-term sort of contract for deed or potentially just a seller-financed sort of property. And there is a difference between the two, and I'll talk about that. But anybody have any thoughts or questions, though, initially, before we kind of get into that?
Yeah, normally the owner will own the deed and people.
Correct. And that's what's called a contract for deed, which is a situation of where you would retain technical ownership of the property until the last payment is made on the property by the borrower, and at that point in time, the deed would transfer to the borrower and they would become the owner. Up until that point, they are simply kind of an owner in waiting, if you will. Okay? Make sense?
Are there any federal regulations against that?
Yeah, and once again, this gets into that whole buyer beware. On the residential side, it tends to get a lot more regulated. But on the commercial side, yet again, you can get away with a lot more in terms of not having to go through and deal with a lot of those more kind of consumer protection types of things. Okay, somebody, Frederick, do you have a question or comment?
No, it's okay, I'll table it.
Okay, so the point is, if you wanted to buy a property or a set of properties, this could be a relatively easy way to do so, because once again, the lender is the current owner, and they could be, you know, in a situation of where they can offer you potentially more favorable terms than maybe a traditional lender might, and not as many of the closing costs. So it could be, you know, a very advantageous way to actually acquire the property. I mean, personally, I probably acquired 7 or 8 commercial properties that way, and I think it was one of the best things I could have ever done, because you can avoid a tremendous number of those extra sort of, if you can do your own due diligence and understand what you're getting yourself into, then, you know, there's a lot of those transfer costs that you can potentially avoid. But if you don't, yeah, there's a lot of things that you can potentially ensnare yourself in.
Financially, obviously, but if you don't have an environmental issue with your land, what is the benefit to a seller for doing that?
Well, the seller, once again, it may be a situation of where they can simply say, I'm able to offer you a very quick closing without a lot of additional paperwork. And trust me, I mean, once you have gone through a commercial building purchase, the brain damage that you incur during that process of all of the things that have to fall into place to make that happen, versus you just simply showing up, here's my down payment check, and literally close that same day, it's worth it.
The seller can get a higher price too, usually.
Well, in some cases, the seller can get a higher price as well. Or they may simply, once again, can get more money by virtue of them financing. They're able to effectively earn interest. I mean, one of the properties I owned, I mean, I did just that. I did a seller financing situation with one of the tenants that was in the property, and said, okay, for the next, 30 years, make, your mortgage payments of, $3,000 a month, to me, and, done deal. And it's contract for deed, so literally 30 years into the future, they will actually get possession of the property, or, well, get title of the property. So it's one way, and I think it's an overlooked way, and it's not something that an institutional investor is ever going to engage in. But what I'm talking about is, once again, as an individual, smaller to mid-size sort of, it's an ideal way to get a person's foot in the market. Because the other thing that the property owner may or may not even require is a down payment. Because once again, if you're the seller and it's the sort of thing that literally they could be willing to just start making payments to me. Because they're getting the interest off of, obviously, the loan.
You could treat lease purchase agreements within that.
Yeah, and in one sense, it's just kind of an extension of kind of like rent to own. Just another variation. Okay?
It can give you more like rights to the property, obviously, right? So would you?
Well, see, as the owner of the property selling it to someone in a contract for deed, I still effectively am the owner of the property by legal record, and however, it allows me that in the event they stop making payments, I can immediately basically say, as by virtue of the agreement that we have, if they stop making payments for a period of 60 days, and they're 60 days in arrears, then the deal is off. I take full repossession of the property.
Okay.
Well,
Does that buyer have like, development rights, so he can develop the property and, earn more income from the property and all that?
In that particular circumstance, it's not applicable, but yes, you could do
But
that.
you can contract.
Absolutely. Okay.
See, that's where I go back to like federal regulations and stuff like that. Even in a commercial situation, all right, something happens, I'm 60 days back, now you just completely tear up.
Once again, it's buyer beware. You hope that doesn't happen, but it could.
Before does the person who is financing the property do they hold a deed? I mean,
Yes.
what kind of security do they have?
No, that's it. I mean, like in that particular circumstance, I hold the deed, nothing has changed with the county clerk. All that potentially would be filed would be potentially a note that you might want to file, but even that, you're not required to.
I mean, what would
Right.
you file as?
You could file a note, but once again, you're not required to.
Okay.
It's the sort of thing that, once again, it's more of a contractual agreement between two parties.
Okay.
You still have to maintain all your liability insurance.
Right.
Okay.
If something
Property
happens,
taxes,
it's you.
right, right.
And
Okay.
is Texas, is that a lien state or a federal?
Well, Texas, we deeds of trust. And so as a result, the normal situation is that you have a three-party instrument. You have the borrower, the lender, and then a trustee, and then that trustee will effectively hold and reserve basically the deed until, once again, the mortgage is completed. So it's not that different. Okay, moving forward, junior mortgages, this kind of got brought up a little bit earlier in the whole thing of like under the cross collateralization, that let's say that you've got multiple properties that you have secured with a loan, and then you want to add on an additional loan or additional lien against that property, then that would be considered to be a junior lien to the original financing that maybe had taken place on the property. And it's also quite common, once again, with individuals in their homes, that you could have, once again, the primary mortgage, but then have a secondary or junior mortgage that effectively, in the event of a default, the person's going to be paid first is obviously the primary mortgage holder, whereas the junior piece is going to be paid second, and so forth, so on. Make sense? Okay. Land contracts, or there, and this can kind of encompass a couple of different things. One of the things that I want to sort of bring up here is, how many of you have heard of ground leases? Okay, what is it? What is a ground lease?
Leasing the dirt.
You're basically leasing the dirt, okay? Now, this can be kind of an interesting thing for commercial property and even residential property, but a lot of times you may have property owners that don't want to actually sell the land for whatever reason, or maybe precluded from selling the land legally. And in some cases, it may actually be government entities. Could be a local city, could be a state, county, even the US government for that matter. And, or could be, you know, an individual. And so what you do is effectively, you can then allow someone to come in, develop on that land, build a building, and engage in 30-year ground lease, 100-year ground lease, whatever it might be. And at the conclusion of that ground lease, then potentially all improvements would revert back to effectively the actual owner of the land. Now, and you sort of say, well, that doesn't seem quite fair or right or whatever, but it depends on how you go in and you initially structure the deal. I mean, a case in point would be, in Texas, a number of city governments and universities, I'm not sure about the ones here, but a lot of times with parking garages, they would do this. They would have city-owned land that they wouldn't want to sell, but they would contract with a parking garage company. The parking garage company would come in, build the parking garage, would collect any and all revenue off of that parking garage for the next 20 or 30 years, and then at the conclusion of that 30 years, everything was then reverted back to the city. And so the parking garage company would have to potentially get all of the revenue that they needed to get out of that over that 30-year holding period, and would have to build, obviously, their financial models to allow for that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Same sort of thing, you know, would be employed with like student housing projects on college campuses. That, you know, a lot of universities obviously own a fair amount of land, but they may not want to actually sell that land and get rid of it forever if they anticipate they're going to be effectively operating for the next, you know, however many hundreds of years. So as a result, they will say, okay, come in, build an apartment community on here, same kind of general model, you collect all the revenue from it for the next 20, 30 years. At the end of that 20, 30 years, we can make the decision as to whether or not it reverts back to dirt, or we effectively take possession of that property and then rehab it and continue to lease it. Make sense? Okay, so it's kind of a cool thing because it really does open up the door for a lot of possibilities, but the key is that you kind of got to go into it in terms of it as a developer, knowing that expiration of that sort of ground lease and what you're going to be potentially faced with as a result. And it also creates some issues of marketability with the property, because what if you decide to sell your interest, in it 5 years until the lease expires? Well, then of course you've got to value, well, what is the value of that for the last 5, those sorts of things. Okay.
In that instance, there's no real reversion value to the lot.
Correct. Yeah, it's pretty much
Just cash flow.
it's just cash flow. Once the cash flow is done, it's done. Okay. Okay. Foreclosures. We talked a little bit about that. You can have effectively a judicial foreclosure, non-judicial foreclosure, and I'm sure that you guys talked about that in your law class. But the key thing with foreclosure, no lender really wants to go through the foreclosure process as a general rule. It's time-consuming for them. It costs money for them. And so in many cases, they will do what it takes to try to avoid foreclosure, which is part of the reason why they may be so onerous up front with a lot of the restrictions they place upon you as a borrower, and why, it's like you sort of, in one sense say, well, don't they just, in the event that I stop paying, they can obviously just foreclose on me and they can collect that money and sort of walk away. Not always that easy, especially here in Florida compared to Texas. Florida is set up to where the foreclosure process is a very lengthy process. In Texas, you pretty much stop making payments, they can have you foreclose within no matter of a few months, okay? And so totally different sort of situation. So, that in and of itself is a substantial thing to just be aware of and make sure that you keep that in the back of your mind. Okay, moving on in terms of some terminology to make sure you're familiar with. Negative amortization. This is kind of where you become upside down on your loan. Okay, kind of what we were talking about earlier with when you had the prepayment penalty involved, but this is a sort of thing where you could, obviously, if you're not making enough of a payment or you don't make your full payment, you could end up in a situation of where you're effectively negatively amortizing the loan. In other words, the loan is getting larger and larger over time because you're not making enough of a payment. One of the things that you're going to see when we get into effectively the next round of material, specifically the adjustable rate mortgages and some of the kind of unique mortgages that exist there, like graduated payment mortgages, where you can have, which are basically like stair-step mortgages, that your initial payments are really low and don't really pay down the loan. In actuality, your loan balance is increasing. And so while you might have started with a $100,000 loan, by the time that you actually start paying it down, you might actually have a balance of $150,000. Okay? And so that is sort of known as negative amortization, and so it can be a really scary thing. Okay, moving on. One of the points we were talking about earlier in terms of types of mortgages, the constant amortization mortgage and the interest-only mortgage. And we're going to do some actual calculations of these in one of our next class sessions. I just kind of want to explain them real quick. The constant amortization mortgage is one whereby you are saying, I want to pay down $1,000 a month of the principal balance every single month. And in so doing, if you had a 30-year, 360-month loan, and that would mean that you're paying $1,000 a month each of those 360 months, so the principal balance would have been $360,000. Does that make sense? But it would be the upfront payment would actually be larger because of interest than the final payment. So it would not be a fixed payment on the interest, only on the principal. Okay? Interest-only mortgages, this is where we're saying the Wild West, but these things still exist. And especially in the residential market, and this is one of the reasons that we got into the crisis that we got into several years ago, wherein you had people that were getting residential mortgages that they were interest only, and in some cases, the mortgages, instead of you borrowing 80, 90, 95% of the property's value, you were borrowing 100 or 105% of the property's value because the expectation that somehow the market was going to keep increasing and that would all be okay. But these are very scary sorts of things to get into, but the reason why people get into them, the reason why lenders offer them, is because it allows the borrower, especially on the residential side, to qualify for a larger dollar value property than they ordinarily would be able to qualify for. And that begins to be this whole business of kind of what Dustin had brought up at one point. You know, if you're dealing with the lender that's going to be servicing this loan and keeping this loan on their portfolio, they're probably going to be a lot more conservative in terms of their lending practices than the lender that makes the loan with the expectation they're going to flip this loan off to someone else and let them be stuck with the problem of, you know, what may happen 2 or 3 years into the future. Okay? And then reverse annuity mortgages, we'll be doing some problems with these. These have kind of resurrected themselves. It sort of died, resurrected, resurrected, died, you know, over the years. Been around since probably the 1960s and 70s. It basically, I could be really crass and sort of say, well, they're the loans that take advantage of old people. And to a certain extent, you know, they may or may not. You know, the reality of the situation is this. And these are pretty much residential. We're not going to spend a lot of time on them because we really want to focus on the commercial stuff. But the thought process is you've got someone that maybe fully owns their home. They have $500,000 in equity in their home, but yet they are getting a government Social Security check and a pension check that's barely covering their existence. And so the only real value is their home. They don't want to move out of their home. They want to stay in their home. And so what can you potentially offer them? Well, the reverse annuity mortgage is a situation of where you can come into that person and say, all right, we are going to make payments to you for the rest of your life or for a certain number of years for a certain dollar amount at a specified interest rate, and then you get to sort of collect that money as an annuity for however long it lasts. The problem is that many of them, at the conclusion of that, you may very well be kicked out of your home. If you outlive, effectively, the reverse annuity mortgage. And so, all of those, in terms of how they're structured, we can talk a little bit more about that later, but those are just some of the things that I would like for you to kind of spend a little bit of time, in addition to the other stuff we talked about today, in the first 4 chapters in the book, to kind of go through. So if you're asking, how can I kind of go back, review, figure out some of the stuff that you talked about today, I would say go back, focus probably more on chapters 3 and 4, but 1 and 2, I mean, there's some information there that we did talk about, but if you read through those first 4 chapters out of the book, you should be pretty good. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the structure of the course. What we're going to do in this course, in the real estate finance course, we're going to have 2 tests, a midterm and a final. That's it. Okay? Each one's going to be worth 50% of your grade. Okay? Each one is pretty much going to be a set of computations and a few short answer questions. The majority will be computations. The computations will be broken up as to calculator computations and Excel-based computations. So from today's discussion and lecture, you should have a pretty good idea of the kind of questions and the kind of sort of things that you would be responsible for. We walked through a number of calculator questions. We walked through a number of effectively Excel sort of questions that were paralleled the calculator things. We talked about a number of conceptual issues as it relates to different aspects of real estate finance, and needing to be familiar with those different pieces of terminology, but not just from a definitional standpoint, but also, like if I asked you a question of what are some of the trade-offs that exist between getting a higher interest rate and a lower interest rate with a lender, do you not think you could answer that question? Yes or no? okay? Based upon some of the different things that we talked about. Or what is the difference between a technical default and an actual default? What is effectively a prepayment penalty and why is it charged? You follow what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's nothing that inherently you're going to see on that test that we haven't effectively talked about. Okay, so it's up to you. All of the sessions are being recorded. All the sessions will be uploaded to the website, and I'll point that out for those of you that are new as to where those are going to be located. But you can watch everything all over again in the event that you need to kind of go back and review something that we talked about in class, or once again, you can use the information or use the information on Dropbox to kind of help you out there as well, okay? Now, when will the test be? Okay, well, the final exam, when do you think that will be? The last vestige of the day of our last day of class for this course. And I think that,
March 14th.
just to double check, yep, March the 14th, toward the, so it'll probably be, the time frame, probably about 3 hours, so probably like 11 to 2 or something like that. And what we might do is break it up a little bit, have half of it, once again with the calculator, half of it with Excel, and kind of break it up over lunch or something like that, okay? The midterm, obviously what I'm planning on doing there, it's not going to be next class session, but it will be the following class session, and it will cover everything that we have covered up to that point. Okay, does that make sense?
What's the date?
That date
Valentine's.
is, yeah, it is Valentine. There you go. Okay, so happy Valentine's Day. Okay, you get a little test. All right. So, in that test, we'll try to schedule it kind of the same way, maybe probably right around the lunchtime, so that you can kind of, we'll maybe start it around 10 or 11, and then finish it up by 2, and then be done with that for the next class. Okay. Now, one of the things that you all, and I sent the schedule out, obviously a while back to most of you now, the new folks, I've actually put it online in the Dropbox account so that you can look at it. But what you will see is over the course of this semester, Kevin Hogan and I are sharing responsibilities for Development 1 and Development 2. I am going to take on part of the responsibilities, and so like this afternoon at 2 o'clock we will start the development class, and then next week he will be coming in and taking over and starting with project management software, as well as guest speakers and site visits. Okay, so my plan is that pretty much after today we will have more of a lecture-ish kind of thing for that class session from 2 to 5. But what we're going to try to do is this 2 to 5 time slot is to reserve that for guest speakers and site visits to get you out of the classroom, because right now many of you are already a little funky in the head. Okay, so I understand that, and that's okay. But we'll try to make this afternoon's session on the development stuff reasonably interesting and kind of go with that. Okay, any questions?
Should I start working on my responses to those 3 questions you said might be on the test?
It's up to you. Okay, so
Will the final encompass everything, or just from that point?
just that point forward. But
From midpoint
the
forward.
reality of it is, in one sense, it's comprehensive because this stuff builds on top of, it's kind of like you could not not understand this first half of the material and be able to perform. It's like once you get lost in the forest, you're lost. Okay, and you're going to pretty much stay that way. Sadly, I mean, it's not. I will do everything I can to try to help you out, but the reality of it is, this stuff, it just gets more complicated, because what we did this morning was, in my mind, it's the very fundamental kind of core of what all of this is about. And what we begin to do is we begin to complicate it up with other little bits and pieces that kind of stem from that. But you've got to understand that stuff before you sort of move forward. Okay, which is why I asked the other folks that weren't enrolled in this class to go ahead and be here for this one day, so that at least you kind of get that core material under your belt. Okay, all right. Other questions, thoughts, observations? Okay, so let's do this. We've got like 4 or 5 minutes before we officially start with the development class, and we'll have supposedly one or two more people, I guess, joining us that didn't show up today. So let's kind of go around the room. But obviously, we want to introduce the new folks and that sort of thing. The lights turn on the right way. And so why don't we just start up here with Robert, and we'll kind of work our way back. Just everybody, just do the quick introduction, just to the extent that everybody kind of understands maybe a little bit about what your interest is, post the program, and just we'll go around the room real quick. Nothing extended.
All right, so quickly, my name is Robert Saunders. My background is project management, finance, and business administration. I'm in this program so I can become a billionaire, pretty much off of the foundation of real estate development. Oh, and this is my 3rd semester here. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Hi, my name is Maricela Pimenta. My background is I'm an engineer, industrial engineer, and I've been doing most of green construction, water-related issues, and I just wanted to learn more and try to do something on my own.
My name is Mark Brink. I have a background in architecture, and I'm also a general contractor now. And my goal is to get into development and learn more. The program's been great so far, and it's my last semester. Thank God.
My name is Alyssa Schuster. My background's in hospitality and business. I work for a commercial real estate company doing market research now, and long term I'd like to be a developer.
Hey, Brian Pumford, background 11 years in the Air Force, and right now I'm project manager for NextEra Energy, developing wind farms across the country. So, billionaire also, that'd be nice. And basically using the class to help out with my current job, but then looking to do something on my own.
And my name is Janae Valentine, everybody. My background is in marketing. I got a business degree from my university, and I'm a realtor right now as well. What I want to get out of this program is eventually I want to get into project management and be, a developer and learn all that I can from this program and be a billionaire.
Should team up with that.
Right.
One place.
Hello everybody, my name is Juan Barroso. My background is in finance. This is my 3rd semester. I also want to have a little bit of background experience in property management, and my goal is also to get into the real estate, commercial real estate.
Hi everyone, my name is Laura. It's my first day of class, first semester here. I'm actually a paralegal. I do have experience in real estate and different things. I was a mortgage broker for about 2 years or so, and I have I had different jobs in real estate, and I'm eager to learn and see what I can do with with what I learned here. I do want to have something on my own. That's about it.
Hello, my name is Dustin Anderson. I'm also a general contractor, and this is my 3rd semester in the program. And I'm just looking to learn. I've had some experience in residential, but never real commercial, properties, and this has been kind of like an eye-opener for the commercial, but I too want to be a developer and eventually, maybe not a billionaire, but 100 millionaire.
That's crazy.
Hi, my name is David Fernandez. I have a background in healthcare, specifically assisted living facilities with my family. I would like to, in the future, get more into real estate and eventually open up bigger assisted facilities in Dade County and Robert. Thanks.
Everyone, Tyler Kitson. This is my 2nd semester here. I'm currently working for a developer at one of our projects in Naples as project coordinator, and hopefully this program will expand my knowledge and help me move up in the company and see where it goes from there.
Kathleen Mitchell. I have about 12 years experience in residential real estate. Right now I'm an asset manager for Fannie Mae. This is my 2nd class with the program, hoping to get more of a knowledge about commercial, anything outside of residential.
I work for a commercial development company. We develop grocery anchor shopping centers and hope to gain some knowledge.
Frederick Jackson. I'm Frederick Jackson. I'm looking to get out of this program, to become a developer one day or work for a developer. Right now, I am a realtor, and this is my third term in the program, and I'm excited.
Daryl Blue, looking to get out of the program, learn as much about residential development as I can. It's my second term here, and my background is in sports marketing and business.
I guess so when you know me here, you're employed.
The real.
Background real estate, not working in the business now. Chance. Come back to finish where I left off and hope is standing on
All right. Well, it is almost 2 o'clock. Why don't we do this? Take a quick little 5-minute break. Everybody get a drink of water and get settled in for the next 3 hours.
All right.
Yeah, it is far. And you know.
No, this is my second, that's the third, I'm coming to that.
Oh, okay.
So, I think he's gonna take me longer than everything.
As long as it gets done.
Okay.
Are those notes online as well? Or no?
Which ones?
Notes that you write?
My plan is well, actually, since I'm recording them, then they will be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Matter of fact, remind me, I'm going to need to show everybody where those are going to be.
Are we gonna need the computers for this one?
Yep.